When we announced the movie that people would be excited about it, didn't think that it would spawn all these TikToks about it and that people would be so passionate and angry about, some of the casting choices, some of the outfit choices. But when I wrote the book, it wasn't about the age of the characters. It wasn't about what they were wearing. I don't even think I described any clothing in the book. It was about the message that I wanted to get across. And I think the people that are doing the movie are doing such a good job.
I have been fortunate to work with amazing directors and incredible actors on roles that I love, which is wonderful. It's a blessing, but it's also horrible because now I'm like, I only want to do that all the time. So I'm sure my agents want to kill me at times because I'm like, no, I don't want to do anything unless it's the best thing ever. That's the thing that's excited me more than anything I've ever.
Hey besties, welcome back to my channel. This past week has completely exposed what might be Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' biggest mistake in their entire mission to take down Wayfair and Justin Baldoni. And honestly, it's not what most people think. Their biggest mistake wasn't trying to take over a film behind the scenes. It wasn't secretly feeding false accusations about Baldoni, Heath, or Wayfair Studios to the press during promo, or even afterward through the CRD pipeline. It wasn't even using their fame and influence to pressure Wayfair into bending to every demand the couple threw their way. No, their fatal error was teaming up and strategizing with Stephanie Jones. Why? Because Judge Lyman appears to dislike Stephanie Jones even more than he dislikes Justin Baldoni, and that is saying something. And for Wayfair, that dynamic works beautifully in their favor. Blake Lively's decision to align herself with Jones through that questionable Vanson lawsuit in New York, along with her ongoing involvement in Jones' case against Abel, where Vanson gets pulled in indirectly, may be slowly destroying the little credibility she has left in court. Now, we already know she doesn't carry much credibility in the public's eyes, but Judge Lyman has been unusually patient with her during the discovery battles. So far, we haven't seen where he'll land on the major motions, the ones that could end the case through summary judgment or result in rulings strictly on the pleadings. He's already thrown out Blake Lively's lawsuit against Jed Wallace. Then after that, Wallace's countersuit against her was dismissed in Texas as well. Neither of them has filed new lawsuits anywhere, so those battles appear closed, at least for now. But Blake is still trying, even now, to access information she probably shouldn't be getting her hands on. And the breaking point came a couple of weeks ago when she made a bold and messy choice. She tried to interfere in a motion to compel that she did not file that had nothing to do with her, and that was entirely tied to Stephanie Jones' lawsuit against Tag, Abel, Nathan, Wayfair, and Bellin. She attempted to insert herself into that fight by filing a motion to compel for a subpoena she didn't issue, and then walked into court hoping to argue it. But the judge shut it down immediately, basically telling her, "You're not a party to this case. Only the actual parties will be heard." At that same hearing, we saw my favorite disastrously incompetent, and yet somehow endlessly entertaining, attorney Kristen Towler. I jokingly have a crush on her because she once sent me a cease and desist letter and signed it with yours kindly. I was like, okay girl, I guess I belong to you now. Anyway, she argued that this motion to compel was still timely, even though the subpoena was issued after fact discovery had officially closed. Her argument was that all kinds of issues popped up in the depositions, so they needed these documents, and since no summary judgment hearing or trial date had been set yet, there would be no real prejudice. So, she claimed, the court should force Katie Cassis to hand over documents, especially because Katie's testimony didn't match Melissa Nathan's testimony about a website connected to Jones. Then Wayfair stepped in like, "No, Judge, absolutely not." They told him the motion should be denied because the subpoena was late, it was issued after discovery had closed, and the Jones team didn't ask for permission from the court first. Now they were essentially showing up trying to ask for forgiveness instead of following procedure and pressuring the judge to demand that people turn over documents anyway. Wayfair also reminded the judge about something important. They had previously asked for an extension to take Taylor Swift's deposition, and he shut them down, saying they didn't do their due diligence. So they argue the same logic should apply here. And last week, the judge agreed. He slammed the door on the entire request. Jones' team had thrown in a bunch of excuses, concerns about spoliation, the need to compare testimonies, and so on, but Judge Lyman found every one of their arguments weak, unconvincing, and nowhere near enough to establish good cause. He didn't buy the spoliation claim. He said their argument didn't actually address the concerns raised by Wayfair or by the court. If the Wayfair defendants had truly withheld documents, Jones should have filed a motion to compel against them during discovery. If evidence was genuinely destroyed, the right path would have been sanctions, not a late subpoena. And they completely failed to show how any alleged misconduct by Wayfair justified their own failure to issue the subpoena earlier. What the judge basically said was that Jones' team was trying to gaslight and distract from the real issue, and none of that worked on him. The main reason he rejected their request was simple. She never got permission from the court to issue that subpoena in the first place. The judge pointed out that while nothing stops Jones or her lawyers from politely asking Case to hand over the documents on her own, what they absolutely cannot do is send out a late subpoena without the court's approval and then demand that the court enforce it without showing any legitimate good cause. Because they failed to prove good cause, their request to compel those documents was denied. The judge essentially told them, if Katie Case wants to voluntarily give you these documents without a subpoena, she's free to do so. But since she cannot be forced to hand anything over now, and because she's not even a party in this lawsuit, she has almost no incentive to cooperate. And when Katie's lawyers wrote to the judge, they explained that although they objected to the subpoena's timing and overly broad scope, they were still willing to discuss the possibility of a limited supplemental production. They did have that discussion, but only with the understanding that any production might be restricted because Katie is still bound by confidentiality obligations from her old employment contract with the agency and with Melissa Nathan's company. That contract contains confidentiality rules and other restrictions that limit what Katie is even allowed to share. Given all of that, the parties did reach a narrow agreement about what Katie could potentially produce. Katie's team also notified her former employers about what limited documents she intended to provide, which triggered an objection from those employers and led to more discussion between their lawyers. And now, after all that correspondence, Jones' team has filed a motion to compel. Katie's lawyers made it clear they do not want to violate the judge's orders or break any contractual confidentiality rules, so they will only do what the court explicitly allows. But because the subpoena was invalid and denied, Katie no longer has to hand over anything. Any earlier agreement about producing documents is now meaningless. So at this point, Katie is under no obligation to provide a single document. When Blake Lively tried to step in and get involved, she filed her own motion supporting Jones' attempt to compel production, but the judge didn't let her argue during the hearing. He flat out said that Blake's involvement wasn't relevant to the issue. He effectively dismissed everything she was trying to argue. Blake's entire point was that Katie's recent willingness to work with Jones supposedly proved that Katie had been hiding documents that should have been turned over to Blake too. Her team is clearly reaching hard to create links that simply don't exist. Katie's work for the Business Insider article, or whatever collaborative website content she helped create, has absolutely nothing to do with Blake Lively's case. But Blake tried to argue that because Katie withheld documents from Jones, it means she must have also withheld documents from Blake's legal team. They even tried to spin this into more accusations of spoliation by Melissa Nathan and Mr. Wallace, claiming Katie agreed to produce documents as long as the court ruled on Wayfair's objections. Blake's lawyers are basically saying, Melissa Nathan worked for Blake as a digital strategist. Katie worked under Melissa. Their testimonies don't perfectly match, so maybe Melissa Nathan lied. And if Melissa lied about one thing, she must be lying about the so-called digital retaliation campaign too. They're pulling these threads and stretching them as far as possible. They claim that if Katie's documents show Melissa wasn't truthful, then Melissa's denials about running a digital smear campaign would be largely, if not completely, discredited. It's obvious they're trying to salvage their digital campaign argument by painting Melissa as a liar, a person who deletes evidence, and someone who commits perjury, with Katie supposedly proving all of this. Blake then tried to argue that Jones' subpoena helps her as well, that she also needs these documents because they would supposedly support her claims. It's obvious the two teams are still working together, because there's absolutely no legitimate reason for Gottlieb, Blake's attorney, to file something tied to a motion that isn't his and one he has no standing to argue. He tried to force a connection where none exists, and the judge immediately saw through it and reminded him he has no right to make that argument. The bigger picture here is that Stephanie Jones is not winning the lawsuit she filed. In fact, Her attempts to get herself dismissed from the claims Jen Abel brought against her have been rejected multiple times. She has repeatedly tried to escape liability, and each time, the court has shut her down. Stephanie tried to argue that Jenel hadn't actually acted as her employee, that she was operating on her own, and that Stephanie had nothing to do with the alleged smear campaign. Therefore, she shouldn't be responsible for indemnifying her. But the judge rejected that argument immediately. He said, no, based on the facts presented, Jenel was working as her employee, and because of that, Jenel has every right to bring these claims forward. Those claims survive and can move past the motion to dismiss stage. The same thing happened with Jenel's lawsuit accusing Stephanie of going into her phone. Jenel survived that motion to dismiss as well, meaning she is allowed to move ahead with claims involving a violation of California Penal Code, specifically the section dealing with unlawfully accessing someone's phone and removing data. Even if someone physically gives you the phone, that does not mean they are giving you consent to dig into the contents, enter private areas, or extract their personal information. This has nothing to do with whether the person is an employer or employee. It's strictly about California's privacy laws, which heavily protect the contents of someone's communications. Those state laws are completely different from federal laws related to wiretapping or stored communications. California is extremely strict about private communication protections, and that's why Jenel's claims were allowed to continue. The judge also allowed her to move forward with a conversion claim. Then, when she amended her complaint again, she included 3 claims that are now active against Stephanie Jones. What the judge has essentially told them is that he believes Jen Abel's arguments have merit. He has made it clear that Abel may actually have a legitimate case involving the alleged theft of her data, the use of Vanzin, and the way Jen's content was taken from her phone and repurposed to create the CRD. That is the core of Jenel's lawsuit against Stephanie Jones. And Blake Lively's company, Vanzin, is directly involved because it was through Vanzin and through the sham litigation Blake filed that she gained access to Jen's phone in the first place. When Jen submitted her second amended complaint, she simply removed the claims that had been dismissed earlier. Her updated lawsuit now alleges violations of California Penal Code 502, conversion, and promissory fraud. The promissory fraud claim needed to be rewritten cleanly to be reinstated, and she did that successfully. Stephanie didn't even try to dismiss those claims again, meaning all 3 are officially moving forward. The promissory fraud allegation is extremely important because it centers around how Abel handed over her phone and gave the passcode, only because she believed the purpose was to transfer her number to a new device. That transfer never happened. Her argument is that she turned over the iPhone and passcode solely to facilitate the number transfer, and that Jones Works never intended to follow through. Instead, they tricked her into giving access, and then used that access to copy, extract, and share her private data without any authorization. Abel also claims Jones Works kept control of the phone number to disrupt her life and cause chaos, damaging her personal and professional relationships. That alleged deception is what supports the Penal Code 502 claim and the conversion claim. And because Stephanie did not attempt to dismiss these claims again, they are all moving ahead. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds continuing to align themselves with Stephanie Jones is only dragging them deeper into a legal disaster. They are tying themselves to someone the court sees, at least from Abel's perspective, as someone who exploited Jen and mishandled her phone contents. And because Vanzin is Blake and Ryan's shell company, they are automatically connected to Stephanie's conduct. This puts Blake in a strange and damaging position. On one side, she claims she is the victim of a coordinated digital attack orchestrated by Wayfair, Melissa Nathan, Tag, and others, allegedly in retaliation for speaking out about sexual harassment. That is the core of her argument. But on the other side, her company Vanzin is entangled with the same person, Stephanie Jones, who is accused of harming Jen Abel, taking her data, and violating her privacy. So Blake and Ryan's business is associated with the alleged victimization of someone else at the exact same time they're insisting they are victims themselves. And because those claims against Jones are still active, and because Blake keeps trying to insert herself into the Jones case to gain information, evidence, or discovery, it paints a contradictory and damaging picture. She's using both cases to fish for evidence to support her version of events, yet she still hasn't been able to actually prove those claims. and her refusal to separate herself from Stephanie Jones is almost certainly going to destroy her credibility. When Jen Abel and Wayfair filed the third-party complaint bringing Jones into Blake's lawsuit, the goal was clear: divide Blake and Stephanie. Because if Blake somehow wins her case and gets the indemnification she's asking for, then Stephanie Jones could end up on the hook for everything. That means that Stephanie could be forced to pay not only Blake's damages, but also the enormous legal fees, possibly millions, that have gone into the defense. And even with that massive financial risk hanging over her head, Stephanie and Blake are still working together. Blake is still helping Stephanie fight for late subpoenas and still supporting motions the court has already said are improper. They continue to move as a team, even though doing so is obviously hurting Blake's case and her credibility, and the judge sees it all. Both parties are filing motions for sanctions and spoliation at the same time, almost like they're coordinating their attacks. It's obvious they're working together, trying to flood the docket and overwhelm Wayfair so badly that the company can't keep up. They're doing it aggressively on both fronts, through Jones and through Lively. But here's the difference. While the judge has occasionally shown a bit of patience or understanding towards some of Lively's arguments, he has absolutely no sympathy for Stephanie Jones. None at all. He's made that clear over and over again. And it makes sense, because at the end of the day, Jones was Jen Abel's employer. She's the one who passed documents to Lively, and she's the one whose actions could, if federal authorities ever decided to pursue it, potentially cross into criminal territory. If you lay everything out side by side, the things Jones is accused of doing compared to the things Blake claims Wayfair did aren't even close. Nothing Blake has accused Wayfair of reaches the level of potentially criminal behavior that Jones's actions might. We're talking about possible theft of data, taking someone's phone, accessing their private information, abusing a sham subpoena, handing over documents without notifying the person affected, and then using those texts to humiliate, manipulate, splice, cherry-pick, and even fabricate evidence to make events look like something they weren't. And now that this behavior has been exposed, instead of taking accountability, they just keep doubling down, again and again, dragging Blake and Ryan along with them. Their continued partnership with Jones is pushing them into fights that don't even involve them. Now they've filed yet another motion to compel involving privilege logs. It seems like the endless requests, demands, and filings from Blake's side are making it almost impossible for Wayfair to respond to everything within the deadlines. It looks like a strategy meant to drain resources, inflict damage, and keep the pressure high, as if the goal is to exhaust Wayfair into giving up. And in my opinion, Stephanie and Blake appear to be using the same playbook: team up, overwhelm the other side, drag it out, and hope the other party eventually cracks. But so far, that hasn't worked. And honestly, from a legal standpoint, what Stephanie has allegedly done is far more serious than anything Blake claims was done to her. In the eyes of the court, Stephanie is clearly the bigger problem, the one who has created the most chaos and raised the most concerns. That's why I believe the judge views her with obvious suspicion. And because Blake keeps aligning herself so closely with someone the court clearly sees as the villain of this entire situation, it makes Blake look less innocent. Her association alone damages her credibility. And that's the real issue. It exposes her and Ryan as people willing to collaborate with someone accused of crossing legal lines. And if Jones allegedly broke laws to help them, and Blake and Ryan allegedly helped her break laws too, and then all of them use the court system in questionable ways to push their agenda, then they don't look like victims. Judge Lyman appears to be more frustrated with Jones than anyone else involved. But Blake is choosing to stay close to Jones and their attorneys, at least that's how it appears. And that decision alone is ruining their image, their credibility, and their claims of being wronged. It undermines their entire case, and there may be no coming back from that. Those are my thoughts. Now I want to hear yours. Tell me what you think in the comments section. And don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching. Bye, besties.